Imagine Arendelle settling under velvet twilight, lanterns waking one by one as gulls whisper over the fjord. Tonight we breathe slowly and listen gently. Two sisters move through quiet halls, hearts careful and bright. Before dawn, a secret will open like snowlight, and love will learn another shape. Together, yet are we. Chapter 1, Evening over the fjord. The evening folded itself softly over the fjord as if the sky were laying a shawl across the shoulders of the water. Little boats nudged the stone quay and rocked, tapping in a patient rhythm like a heart learning a lullaby. Windows warmed and glowed, each one a small hearth held up to the dusk. Cobblestones remembered footsteps from the market day and cooled gratefully. Far overhead, gulls slid across the air and skimmed the last amber brightness, their cries already hushed by the wool of night. Along the docks, a baker fastened his shutters and tucked a final basket under his arm. Steam still breathed from the loaves inside. He pressed the back of his hand to the window, testing for heat, and left a tiny oval mist behind. A cat lifted its chin from a coil of rope and blinked the baker goodbye. Lamps along the pier bowed into life, coin yellow and kind. Fishermen's knots went quiet. Nets slept clean and coiled. The fjord itself drew a slow silver breath, the tide polishing each step in the seawall as if it were burnishing silver. In the narrow streets, doors made their low, familiar music. Hinges sighed, keys turned. A broom brushed the last spice dust from a shop threshold. Cinnamon scent lifted up into the evening until it became part of the weather. A lamplighter moved like a gentle comet, the tip of his pole kissing glass chimneys one by one. Where he passed, faces softened, and the hush of an expectant festival slipped into place. It was the night before a coronation. Even the wind seemed to go carefully, as if it did not want to smudge the polish on the air. High up the hillside, the castle watched with its many windows, old and awake. Torches traced the line of the gate like stitched sunlight. Inside, the great hall breathed out a cool echo, the sort that makes footsteps sound taller. Banners had been shaken and smoothed. Tables had been rubbed with oil until they reflected chandeliers with a shy confidence. On a sill, a brass bell waited for morning. Beside it lay a sprig of rosemary dropped by a maid who had tucked it behind her ear and forgotten it there when the steward called her name. In a corridor where the stone was always a little chilly, a girl paused and listened. Anna tilted her head like a robin, catching the smallest sounds, someone laughing once and then whispering, a far-off bucket clink, a page turning in the library, a tune being hummed by a guard whose boots creaked when he shifted his weight. She smiled at all of it. Nights like this felt as if the castle had curled into a storybook, and she could walk between the sentences. Her fingers trailed along the wall. She made a small promise to be brave and kind in equal measure. She reached one particular door and stopped. The habit was so old it did not need thought. The wood was smooth at shoulder height from years of careful touches. Anna set her palm there, not pushing, only greeting the quiet. She pictured the room within. A bed made perfectly, a chair beside the window, a wardrobe with a dress sleeping in it, and a small round table with gloves laid out like folded bird wings. She did not say the sentence she knew by heart. She just rested there a breath longer and let the quiet rest back. Behind that door, another girl stood in a square mirror. Elsa lifted her chin by a careful fraction, then let it fall. The candle beside the glass had been burned down to a lake of light. Its white rim caught and held the smallest draft. She did not look at the hand that wanted to shake. Instead, she looked at the glove awaiting it, the soft sheen of it, the way the stitching made a path for the eye to walk. She had learned to walk that path with her gaze when breath felt short. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth, again, slower. Her room was tidy in the way that feels like breathing room, not prison. The bed cover was smoothed without a single crease. The chair by the window was turned just so, as if someone had risen and would return in the next minute. The wardrobe door was ajar by the width of 2 fingers. The small round table held a brush, a pin, a folded handkerchief, and the gloves. When Elsa picked one up, she did it the way a musician lifts a familiar instrument, Not with joy, exactly, but with knowledge of what it can keep steady and what it can set free. The air carried a clean, cool note that lived in this room and had lived here for years. It smelled like pressed linen and the last edge of snow the day after a storm. She opened the window a little to welcome the evening and found the seam of weather right away, that thin line between outside and in. Across the distance, she could see the town's lamps become stars of their own. She could imagine the ovens going quiet, the bakers washing their hands with flour still in their knuckles, the stable hands counting steps back to the straw they would sleep on. On the desk lay the order of the next day, written in a neat schedule that someone else had prepared. The pages felt like stepping stones set across a stream. Elsa traced them with her eyes and did not step. She had rehearsed until the order of the ceremony lived in her hands, not her head. The scepter and orb, the kneel and rise, the turning and the blessing, the reach and the release. It was a dance with invisible music, measured and exact. She would do it. She knew she would. And still, inside the certainty, a small bird of worry tried to lift its wings. Elsa set the glove down. She pressed her fingers together and let them relax. She watched the tiny tremor calm. She let her shoulders lower a fraction. She named what she could control in simple, friendly words. The candle, the mirror, the laces of her bodice, the pin for her hair, the key in the dish that locked nothing and was only a place to put a key. When her mind leapt ahead to the hall, to faces she would be expected to meet, she came back to the small room and counted the blue panes in the window. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, slower. A sound in the corridor lifted the hairs on her arm and then let them fall. The hush of a skirt passing, the brush of a shoulder against stone. Elsa breathed again. She crossed to the wardrobe and opened it fully, letting the lamplight step inside. Silver thread caught and became moonlight for an instant. She remembered the first time she had tried on gloves much too big for her and laughed into the emptiness at how floppy her hands looked. That had been a kinder day, an afternoon filled with the hush of snow falling softly onto soft snow. Down in the kitchens, the night crew banked the fires and clipped the lids onto cooling pots. Someone scraped a spoon across the bottom of a pan and tasted the last sweetness of a custard that would be sugared fresh in the morning. A boy carried buckets of kindling as if he were guarding treasure. Another set out clean bowls like little moons on the long table and made sure the cloth hung even on both sides. They spoke in voices meant for sleeping hours, light and unsharp. A chair leg whispered against the floor and apologized by not doing it again. On the ramparts, 2 guards leaned on their spears and talked about the weather as if it were a shy animal. Clear night, one said. The other nodded and tipped his face to the air. He named the wind by its smell, salt and stone, a touch of wheat from the valley, a shadow of ice from the high places. He was not wrong. Ice was there. Not in the town and not in the harbor yet, but in the idea of tomorrow, in the mountain's breath that sometimes slipped its leash and wandered where it liked. He rubbed his gloves as if to warm the word. Anna wandered the long gallery where portraits hung like paused stories. She whispered greetings to each. The queen with the pearl at her throat. The king with the bright buckle and a smile tucked into the corner of his mouth. A lady with a book open in her lap. A young man whose hat was too big. It felt like paying a night visit to a quiet neighborhood. She made up histories in her head and gave them happy ends. At a window, she pressed her forehead to the glass and puffed a fog circle. She drew a tiny crown inside it and laughed. She thought of tomorrow's music and spun once, a small, silly circle that loosened the last knot of the day inside her shoulders. Then she sobered, because circles brought her to the old door again, the one she had rested her palm upon. A familiar ache visited. It was not sharp. It was a slow ache, like a light that had once been in a room and now lived behind a curtain. Anna did not try to snatch the curtain away. She had learned that trying could make the ache louder. Instead, she straightened, gave the ache a nod, and walked on. In a room across the corridor, Elsa pinched out the candle's flame. The wick glowed orange and then turned to a patient thread of smoke that rose and wrote a brief curling line in the air. Night entered without asking. The window caught it and held it. Elsa let the dark be where it was. She did not fear it. Darkness was only a room where light rested before it returned. She knew how to rest, too, even when every part of her felt as if it ought to be rehearsing. She sat on the edge of the bed and folded her hands. The castle clock tucked the hour into the walls. Far below, the harbor answered with a soft knock of tide against wood. Far above, a star blinked its eye open. The night had begun properly. Across town, a mother bent over a child and told a story about a brave girl who saved a village from a thunderstorm by listening for the kindness inside the clouds. The child asked for the part with the river twice. The mother laughed into the child's hair and began again. The river turned and did not hurry. Elsa lay back and felt the bed hold her, as if the mattress had been taught her name. She traced the ceiling's simple edges with her eyes. She let her breath make a soft bellows sound. She felt the cool of the room against her skin and named it good. Fear, when it visited, always tried to convince her that it alone was the truest thing. But she knew better, even when the knowing was quiet. The truest thing was love. It did not march or shout. It waited and held and tried again. She thought of a door closed for kindness' sake. A breeze moved along the window seam, testing it like a careful hand. The curtain lifted and fell once, like a breath. On the sill, the brass bell did not ring, but it remembered ringing and seemed content. On the small round table, the gloves rested. They did not look like prison. They looked like tools, like bridges, like a way across a difficult river. Elsa turned her head to them only once and then let her gaze drift back to the ceiling. She whispered thank you to the quiet, which had stayed with her all evening. Down in the town, the lamplighter finished his route and stood at the end of the quay to count the dots of light he had made. He did not call them his, but he felt tender toward them, the way a gardener feels toward dark earth he has prepared. The bell tower breathed and did not yet chime. The fjord wore dusk like a cloak sewn by the hands of minutes. The boats tapped again and then were still, as if someone had pressed a finger to their lips. The cat on the coil of rope tucked its nose under its paw and slept. Anna drew her curtains and set her slippers side by side like two small boats that had chosen the same harbor. She sat on the floor for a while and combed her hair with calm strokes, as if brushing also soothed the room. She filled her mind with imagined conversations that did not go wrong. She pictured herself walking into the great hall and being greeted by warmth that did not vanish. She rehearsed smiling in a way that was not too much and not too small. Then she laughed a little, because if anything was too much, it would be her rehearsing. When at last she climbed into bed, the sheets sighed around her pleasantly. She fitted her knees into their favorite place and tucked the blankets as if they were a second pair of arms. She whispered good night to the ceiling and to the people she loved, including the person behind the door across the corridor. Somewhere in the castle, a hinge murmured. Somewhere in the town, a dog barked once and thought better of it. The moon raised itself a hand's width and balanced there as if testing the view. Elsa did not sleep immediately. She did not fight the wakefulness either. She let it loosen a little at a time, like untying a ribbon from her hair. When it loosened enough, a memory entered that she did not push away. Two girls in a room wide as laughter, snowflakes bumping like tiny stars against their eyelashes. A small joy that had needed no explanation. She felt the warmth that memory carried, the way it could be a blanket even inside a cool, careful room. She let the memory hold a corner of her, and the corner held. Anna dreamed of lanterns floating down the river and tipping their light into the water where a fish wore it like jewelry. Elsa dreamed of staircases made of song, each step a note that held her weight. The town dreamed of fresh bread. The fjord dreamed of the moon's hand smoothing it. The castle dreamed of crowns that were not heavy and of doors that knew how to open at the right time and for the right reasons. The night kept these dreams like a trustworthy box. Just before the deepest hour, a breeze slipped in from the mountains with the tiniest shiver of cold. It was not a warning, and it was not a threat. It was a reminder that the world keeps many weathers in its pockets and sometimes changes them without meaning to frighten anyone. The breeze moved along the ramparts and through the high windows, past the bell that still did not ring, under the seam of a door that had been closed for a long time, over a small round table where gloves waited patiently. It touched everything and asked for nothing back. The hour came and passed. The fjord turned in its sleep and made a sound like glass being breathed on. The sky thinned until a few more stars showed themselves, as if curious about the town they watched. The lamplighter walked home and carried with him the faint perfume of oil and soot, a homely scent that meant work well done. A maid woke before she had to and lay still, counting the heartbeats before duty would begin. A horse stamped once and shook its mane and thought of oats. The world made small, gentle noises of readiness. When the bell tower finally gave its single, soft note toward the end of the night, it sounded like a hand on a shoulder saying, "Rest a little longer. We're almost there." Anna turned onto her side and smiled in her sleep. Elsa's breath went deeper and even. The castle held them the way a hillside holds snow before it slides into the valley and becomes a river. Outside, the first thin slice of silver at the far edge of the sea imagined itself into being and then withdrew, choosing to wait. Night, generous, kept the place warm for dawn. Between the last dream and the first footstep of dawn, the castle and the town shared one more breath. It may have been the gentlest part of the night. No voices, no work, no thinking ahead. Only the simple companionship of walls, water, sky, and the people within. In that quiet, a story leaned forward, ready to start the next page. The page held the shape of a crown. It held the shape of a door. It held the smallest glint of frost that no one would notice in the dark because it looked like starlight and did not melt. Chapter 2. The Coronation's Eve. Morning had not arrived, yet the castle moved as if it already knew the sun's schedule by heart. In the kitchens, a girl with flour on her cheek tied ribbons around loaves for delivery to the great hall. She hummed without words. The dough had its own music, and she liked to listen. A clerk copied names onto small cards with careful ink, the sort that dries like a leaf pressed between pages. When he finished a line, he blew gently and watched the wet shine settle into quiet. A steward with a voice like velvet gathered the staff beneath a candelabrum and recited the order of service in friendly phrases, not commands, reminders. He spoke of garlands and table linens and the way light would come through the eastern windows at the time of the procession. Everyone nodded because they could see it. Outside, the harbor clinked softly. Ropes creaked the way old friends do when they lean in to talk. The tide stepped up and then down as if testing each stair on purpose. Anna woke before the first bell and lay still, smiling to the weave of her pillow. She did not leap up, not yet. She let anticipation settle the way cocoa settles when you stop stirring. Then she sat, hugged her knees for a breath, and widened the curtains. The view tipped her heart open. Down in the town, a fisherman balanced a basket on his shoulder. On the far ridge, a flock of sheep made a little moving snow of their own. Closer in the castle gardens, gardeners in gray cloaks pulled canvas off trees to look for blossoms, brave enough to try early. Her dress for the day waited on a chair, its color the safe joy of green leaves. She touched the fabric and felt it give a little, as if it liked being greeted. She washed in water so cool it made her gasp and grin. She practiced a greeting to the portrait of a queen who had always seemed stern, and the sternness softened. "Good morning," Anna said to the room, to her reflection, to the whole idea of a coronation. She braided her hair and tucked a ribbon in like a secret. She took one step, then two, and her feet remembered how to hope. Elsa rose in a quieter room. The night had been patient with her, and she thanked it silently. She set her feet on the floor and found the temperature with her toes. The difference between stone and rug made sense. Differences often do when they are small. She rinsed her face, listening to the trickle of the ewer as if it were a companion with polite conversation. The mirror showed a woman who had practiced. The eyes were steady today. That was something she could use. She unwrapped the gloves and laid them out like a sentence she could read without speaking. Her tutor of protocol, an older woman whose hands knew the weight of crown fabric, was waiting in the antechamber. "Good morning," she said, and it was simple, not ceremonial. They stood side by side and looked over the list together. They walked the room as if it were already filled with guests and paused at the places where small difficulties could hide. Thresholds, turns, the fine moment when one must take the scepter without clatter. Elsa practiced setting her breath to the length of a step and felt the step answer, a quiet agreement between body and day. In the music room, a violinist lifted his bow and tried 3 notes that tasted like apple peel, sharp and clean. The cellist answered with a low note that set the floorboards thinking. The two found a conversation. A flutist entered and warmed breath against the mouthpiece, making a ghost of tone before the true sound. The conductor arrived last, hair a little wild from the wind, and tapped the stand with the side of his baton in a greeting rather than a command. They played softly, as if the castle were listening and wished to be soothed. Anna and Elsa met briefly in a corridor flooded with late afternoon light, the kind that makes dust into galaxies. For a breath, they were simply 2 sisters walking toward the same evening. "You look beautiful," Anna said and meant it. "You too," Elsa answered, and also meant it. They did not say the other things. The long years in the door, the silence that tried to look like protection. The light made both of them look like they had stepped out of a painting where the painter had been in love with softness. Twilight collected itself over the water. The harbor lamps woke as if they had been waiting for their cue. On the hill, the castle gathered the night around its shoulders like a cloak that fit perfectly. The steward walked the halls once more with his list and checked the places that love checks, the corners, the thresholds, the edges where a draft could make a child cold. He asked one of the guards to bring extra blankets to the vestibule in case the air turned sharp after midnight. It felt good to prepare kindness, even if it might not be needed. Elsa returned to her room before the hour when music sometimes escapes from the ballroom and wanders the corridors. She did not light the candle this time. She stood by the window and watched the town gather itself toward rest. The gloves were on the table within reach. She did not need them in this moment. Her hands were quiet. She counted boats until she lost track and felt oddly pleased to have lost track. Not everything needed precision. Some things needed mercy. In her own room, Anna tried on 3 different laughs and decided to keep her real one. She practiced a curtsy to no one and curtsied so low she almost laughed again because it felt like falling into a hug from the air. She set out a ribbon for the morning and wrote 2 words on the small slate she kept by her bed. Be kind. Then she wrote 2 more. Be brave. She looked at the pairs and nodded. It felt right that they should live side by side. When the bell called 10, it did so gently. The sound slipped over the roofs and down to the harbor and slipped back again. Some nights, the bell felt like an announcement. Tonight it felt like a blessing. In the high places, the first stars threaded themselves between chimney smoke and joined the night with modesty. Far beyond the town, the mountains kept their blue distance and made a promise only they understood. Elsa lay down at last and let the day collect itself behind her like folded cloth. She set one hand over the other on her stomach and felt the breath move under them like a small tide. She did not rehearse now. She did not name each step. She made a new practice. To think of a room warm with candlelight and the soft sound of people who had eaten together. She built that room in her mind and opened its door. She invited fear to sit quietly in a chair and listen to the clock, too. It surprised her by doing as it was asked. Anna watched the moon lift clear of a thin cloud. She could not help a small, excited kick of her foot under the covers. Then she stilled it, grinned at herself, and whispered a good night to the shape of the door she could not see from here but knew exactly where to find. The good night was not a question. It was a promise. She closed her eyes and slept, as if a hand were smoothing her hair. The castle slept as much as castles ever do. Somewhere a mouse considered a crumb and decided against it. Somewhere a tired hand forgot to put out a candle, and another hand remembered. The night pressed its ear against the roof and listened for storms and heard none. The fjord turned once and was pleased with its own sound. On the writing desk by Elsa's window, the schedule waited with no hurry at all. On Anna's slate, the 2 pairs of words stayed side by side in the dark, keeping each other company. Coronation's Eve deepened to the hour when even dreams grow quiet enough to be mistaken for the pause between heartbeats. That pause can feel like emptiness. Tonight it felt like readiness. The world drew in one long, soft breath and held it. Somewhere in that breath, a very small, bright snowflake imagined itself and then chose not to appear. The air was cool, not cold. The silence was full, not lonely. Morning waited as politely as it could. Chapter 3. Doors open at dawn. Before the sky changed color, the town had already woken to meet it. Ovens blinked into glow and exhaled their first friendly heat. Horses huffed soft clouds that drifted and vanished in the cool. Someone swept the steps of the post office with the respect a person gives to a stage before a play. The smell of soap and yeast braided itself into the morning like two hands holding. Up the hill, the castle bells did not ring yet, but a maid, awake early out of habit and hope, opened a tall window to shake out a rug and found the morning already waiting like a polite guest. The air slipped into the room and made the curtains sway, a quiet dance that asked nothing. She stood still, holding the rug, and listened for birds. When they came, the first notes sounded like drops falling into a basin. She smiled and set the rug across the sill to finish breathing. Anna's eyes opened without a summons. For a heartbeat, she didn't remember why her chest felt light, and then the day placed a crown-shaped thought into her hands. She sat and hugged the idea, then laughed at herself and put both feet on the floor. The wood felt friendly. Her dress waited on the chair, the ribbon exactly where she had left it, the slate with its two pairs of words still side by side. She ran a brush through her hair and told herself a truth she could hold. Today will be different because I will walk through it differently. She washed and dressed and tied the ribbon in a quick, practiced motion that felt like finishing a promise. At the window she paused. The town below seemed freshly invented. A baker carried a tray toward the castle. A woman walked with a bundle of flowers tucked against her chest like a sleeping child. Laundry lines trailed flags of white and pale blue as corners were clipped and knots retied for the wind. She pressed her palm to the glass and left a print that faded slowly, as if the window wanted to keep it. Elsa rose with the quiet. She dressed without hurry and did not try to argue with the part of herself that wanted to count everything. Instead, she gave the counting a task it could love. She counted the threads at the edge of her glove and let her breath match them. When she had counted enough, she stopped. She stood at the window. The sea looked ironed flat in the early light. Far across it, the horizon wore a line of pearl that would soon turn gold. She felt both small and sheltered, as anyone does who stands before a day that will be remembered. Her schedule on the desk did not scold her. It waited like stepping stones over a stream, offering dry crossings. Elsa placed the tip of one finger on the first line, then lifted it, then let her hand fall to her side. The words were not a cage. They were a map she could fold and unfold. She pictured the hall. She pictured walking through people who wished her well. She pictured her hands steady over silver. She pictured, and then she let the pictures dissolve like salt into water, leaving the taste of readiness. In the corridor, the steward's steps made their crisp morning sound. "Good morning, Your Majesty," he said, and there was fondness tucked neatly into the title. He reported that the garlands were hung, the floors were shining, the kitchen had warmed a small pot of honeyed milk in case she wanted it. Elsa thanked him and said the milk sounded kind. She took one sip, then another, and found the sweetness an easy companion. The steward left with the light sound that a person makes when a checklist, as well as a heart, feels satisfied. Down in the stables, a stable hand brushed a mare until her coat picked up the first hints of daylight. He told her the day's news as if she could help. The mare flicked an ear, which is a sort of answer. In the yard, carriages waited like well-mannered bears. Wheels had been wiped. Polished harness buckles learned how to pretend to be mirrors. A boy ran up and down the steps to see how quietly he could place his feet. He laughed when he almost made no sound at all. Anna stepped into the corridor and let the morning find her. Servants passed with baskets and folded cloth. Each said good morning as if they had been saving the words from the night before. She returned the greetings and tried to absorb the steadiness of the place, the way everyone was part of the same choreographed kindness. At the turning near the great stairs, she stopped. The doors to the ballroom were open for air, the room itself still, holding its own breath. Chandeliers waited patient as winter stars. "Oh," She was early to the great hall. The benches and chairs put their backs in careful straight lines along the walls. The red carpet rested like a tongue of warmth down the middle. Through tall windows came the pure beginning of sunlight, not yet gold, only white and soft like milk poured thinly. Anna stood where she could see both the doors and the far end where the small bell had. She pressed her hands together without knowing she was doing it, and exhaled long, the way one does before speaking truth. Elsa joined her a little later, the sound of her shoes precise on the stone. For a moment the hall belonged to them alone. 1,000 moments existed between them that had not been spoken aloud. Neither tried to lasso them now. They looked at each other in the light that made even empty space look ceremonial. "You slept?" Anna asked, keeping her voice soft so the room would not feel it was being used too loudly. "Enough," Elsa answered, which meant yes, and also meant that sleep had been a patient tutor. They stood together and looked at the doors. The ironwork curled into shapes like vines teaching themselves letters. Beyond those doors, Arendelle waited. The waiting was not ravenous. It was curious and hopeful, like a child who wants to know the next part of a story. Anna's hand made a small, brave movement in midair, then settled at her side. Elsa drew a breath so gentle it did not even disturb the edge of her glove. They did not need to say that they would keep each other in sight. The first bell rang, thin, early, tender. People turned their faces toward its sound the way flowers turn to the first line of sun. In the kitchens, ladles paused. In the guardroom, a boot stopped halfway through its lace. In the town below, the boy on the boat smiled without knowing why. The bell did not hurry. It was a bell that believed in beginning at the beginning. Dr. Hinges received a final drop of oil and thanked it by refusing to squeal. Footmen stood easy but ready. Courtiers came in small knots, voices low and pleased. Music swam softly out of a side chamber, a river asking to be followed. The hall gathered people without losing its calm. Everyone seemed to have agreed, without speaking, to be gentle with the morning and with one another. Anna felt the tug to run forward and do everything at once. That happy tumble that sometimes toppled her plans. She did not run. She looked at Elsa and found steadiness waiting, the way rock waits beneath snow. The steadiness did not deny the joy. It simply gave the joy a floor to dance on. "We can do this," Anna said. It was not a question. Elsa nodded. "We can." The steward gave a small signal. Doors that had been taught the choreography of opening and closing since before anyone now living could remember obeyed with grace. The morning entered as if it had been invited to court. Sunlight cut 2 bright paths on the floor, and the dust in those paths rose to dance. Air changed temperature the way a page turns, not all at once, not loudly, but irreversibly. People crossed the threshold, and for a moment, each face looked different in the light, as if the day had briefly asked everyone to be their best selves. From the gallery above, a child let out a delighted whisper that was not quite a word. It floated and landed like a bird on a gentle branch. The musicians felt it and played a shade warmer. The bishop, who had practiced his own calm all week, allowed himself a small inward grin at the timing of the clouds thinly parting. A seamstress standing at the back dabbed her eyes for no reason she could name. Sometimes beginnings do that. Elsa stepped forward to test her pace against the hall's size and felt the hall welcome her like an open palm. She did not hurry. She let the space speak. Anna walked beside her a little, and then drifted to the side where she could watch and be watched and give a simple nod to anyone who met her eyes. It was enough. Enough can be a very brave word. They reached the places that had been chosen for them by custom and practice and stopped as if the floor itself had said, "Please." Outside the high windows, clouds moved on and left a greater clarity behind them. From the fjord came a long, contented hush as tide met stone. A gust lifted and set down the banner above the doors without making any trouble. Elsa took this as the good sign it was. She tipped her head just enough to let her crown catch the faintest light. It did not feel heavy. It felt like responsibility wearing feathers. Somewhere a gull sketched a bright curve across the new blue and stayed. What came next would be ceremony, and ceremony had its own quiet courage. But for this moment, the courage was simply to stand where the morning asked and let light do its work. The hall glowed. The people breathed together. The doors were open. The day had begun. Chapter 4. The Crown and the Gloves. Procession is a language, and that morning Elsa spoke it fluently. Shoes measured their thoughts along the stone. Voices braided themselves into a velvet rope the crowd could hold. The choir breathed a single, gathered breath, and the first note rose like a curtain, revealing nothing new and yet making everything seem new. The bishop moved his hands as if shaping water. Candles stood in their ranks, fire at attention but not severe. The scepter and orb rested on the cushion, with the solemnity of sleeping swans. The velvet beneath them was so still it seemed to be listening. Even the draughts, those small travelers, paused before crossing the aisle. Elsa walked with the pace she had practiced, the one that let her heart keep time without chasing. The gloves did what they had promised. Steadied, softened, stood between her and the world as a kind of veil. She did not distrust the world. She simply knew the value of gentleness as a filter. When she reached the place where a silver lay, she let her breath lengthen, then lengthen again, the way a river widens before it meets the sea. The hall observed. There are moments when even rich rooms grow humbler. The chandeliers were careful not to glitter too much. The air kept its voice low. Elsa lowered her eyes without lowering her courage. She extended her hands in the measured arc taught for generations. Cold, that faithful echo in her, lifted its head, and she answered it with a smile so small only her own bones could feel it. I see you. I am not afraid of you. Not now. The weight of the scepter found her palm and discovered it was welcome. The orb's roundness spoke of completeness, and she held it in a way that made the circle feel trustworthy, not closed. Protocol asked for stillness. She gave stillness. Protocol asked for humility. She gave that too, but not the sort that denies the self. It was the humility of a hillside holding a town without bragging. Anna watched from her place and felt pride bloom like a second sunrise. She clapped first and longest when the moment allowed it, but quieted as quickly, letting the sound become the room's, and not only hers. Their eyes met across the space. A bridge rolled out without noise. In that glance lived all the versions of the life they might yet learn how to share. It was enough to know the bridge was possible. Applause rose and fell like a soft tide. When it ebbed, faint music took its place, and the procession turned from ceremony to celebration. People followed the curve of the carpet toward the banquet, speaking in the new tone people use when the difficult part has gone well. The castle seemed to relax its shoulders. Somewhere a hinge took the liberty of being a little musical as it closed. The banquet had been dressed the way one dresses a friend for a portrait. Nothing gaudy, only what best revealed the friend's nature. Platters steamed, glasses caught small suns, fruits wore their colors as if they had been polished by laughter. Children's feet dangled and barely touched the rungs of their chairs. Old men told each other the same pleasant story in two different versions and enjoyed each twice. Elsa let conversation come to her in gentle waves. She was present the way a harbor is present, receiving, steady, a place for boats to rest. She listened and answered and allowed herself the small luxury of answering with her whole voice, not merely the part that managed impressions. When the questions were tiny, was the train heavy? Do gloves itch? She enjoyed tiny answers. When the questions were wide, what do you hope for? She gave a wide answer. A kingdom that knows how to take care of one another and remembers that strength often looks like good bread, mended roofs, and time given freely. She hadn't planned those words, and they pleased her privately, because they were true enough to lean on. Beside her, a child in a blue jacket reached for a sugared berry and nearly tipped a cup. Elsa's hand started to move before thought could harness it. Started, to catch, to steady, to keep. Somewhere in that half-second, a thread tugged and the glove slipped at the edge. She stopped her hand mid-flight, smiled at the child, and the glove stilled with her. The cup righted itself as if relieved to have been noticed in time. The child offered a solemn thank you, and then forgot the scare with the speed only children possess. That was nimble, someone said warmly. Elsa inclined her head and answered, "We all practice," which was both graceful and true. She could feel the edge of her breathing, the thin line where it might grow ragged. She let the line go slack. She repeated silently the kind names she had given the morning. Candle, mirror, laces, pin. The names worked again. Names are good tools. Music from the ballroom drifted in like good gossip, light, eager to share, harmless. A door somewhere opened to let more air in, and with it came the faintest draft. Elsa felt it as a cool ribbon around her wrist. Not now, she told herself. And the coolness respected that boundary as if it, too, understood protocol. Anna, blushing from laughter with two visiting cousins, glanced over and read her sister's shoulders the way she had learned to do. They were not tight. They were attentive. Good. She excused herself from a story about a sea turtle that had tried to board a ship and crossed the room with a handful of small rescues. A glass of water. A private joke. A light touch to the elbow that translated, "I'm here." Elsa's mouth softened. "How is it?" Anna asked with a glance that included the room and the idea of the whole day, with all its corners and comforts. Through the high windows, daylight matured from pearl to honey. The bishop ate like a person who knew blessings as practical as bread. The steward made invisible circuits and righted what needed attention with the efficiency of wind adjusting a sail. Musicians loosened, then tightened, then loosened again, finding the hour's particular rhythm. The castle gathered all of it. The voices, the heat of the food, the lamps stirring awake for late afternoon, and made of it a room where people remembered, briefly, that they were happier when they practiced gentleness. When the time for the next portion of the day arrived, the steward nodded, and the nod moved through the staff like a ripple through wheat. The ballroom prepared to receive. Elsa and Anna walked together along the short corridor that threaded ceremony to dance. "If you need quiet, look for the fern in the corner," Anna said, eyes quick. "Behind it is an excellent pretending to admire the wall location." Elsa smiled. "And you?" "If I start bouncing, just point me toward a waltz," Anna said. "It will keep my feet from trying to become fireworks," Anna said, which earned her a conspiratorial grin from a maid passing with a tray. At the threshold of the ballroom, they paused, not for show, simply to breathe. Even the best moments get better when breath is remembered. The doors parted. The light inside was a softened gold. Chandeliers set low enough to be companions rather than heavens. The floor had been polished to that particular sheen that looks slippery and never is. Musicians waited with bows resting. Guests arranged themselves in an eager constellation. Elsa took 3 steps in and felt the room see her. It saw Anna, too, and their seeing was kind. There exists a warmth that can make even careful people unfold a little. The ballroom held that warmth like a cupped hand. Elsa reached the place where she was to stand and turned just enough to take in the perimeter. The potted trees with their soft sprigs, the windows rehearsing twilight, the far corner where the fern indeed stood ready to be admired. The master of ceremonies, whose mustache had more choreography than some ballets, announced the first dance with a voice made for velvet conversations. The music began so quietly that the beginning felt like remembering something one has always known. Couples paired, shoes drew calligraphy across the floor. The chandeliers pretended to be constellations. Elsa stepped back from the center, glad to give the dance to the people whose feet had been practicing joy all week. For a handful of measures, she allowed herself to imagine a dance without watching her hands. The imagining was not an ache. It was more like putting a book back on its shelf gently. She felt the gloves, their good purpose. She felt the air, its clean edge. She felt, beneath all of it, the steady stone of herself, older and kinder than fear. The sensation made a new thought. Perhaps steadiness can be music, too. A messenger entered quietly and spoke to the steward, who nodded and sent him away with bread and cheese as thanks. The kingdom had many rooms, and each needed tending. Elsa liked that none of the tending suggested alarm. She moved along the edge of the dance and accepted a few conversations presented like offerings. A grandmother pressed a blessing into her palm in the shape of a wrapped caramel. A fisherman thanked her for the repaired key. A seamstress said she loved the sleeves of the gown because they looked like a promise to move easily through work. Then the smallest of incidents. A child chasing a ribbon, threaded between adults, and nearly tripped at the edge of the dais. Elsa's hand flew and then hovered, a hawk deciding whether to stoop. The glove's seam drew taut, a tiny sound against the polished wood. The child righted. The ribbon fluttered safely away, and the seam relaxed with Elsa's shoulders. Her smile returned almost at once. Almost is sometimes the bravest speed possible. The draft that had earlier behaved like a ribbon returned as a whisper and nested briefly at the base of her throat. She named what she could see: fern, window, chandelier, bow, sleeve, smile. She named what she could do: breathe, stand, soften, listen, wait. She named the room itself safe. Words matter, even silent ones. The whisper, finding no purchase, gentled into ordinary air. At last the steward lifted 2 fingers, the signal that meant the ballroom would shortly spill into supper and conversation. Elsa felt the day's current continue kind. She met Anna's eyes across a spinning couple and sent the shape of a laugh. Anna caught it and sent back the shape of a curtsy that was mostly a joke and a little bit practice. Both exchanges landed. Both sisters stood for a perfect moment in exactly the day they had been promised. A day that did not demand more than they could give. And yet promises, like rooms, have corners where surprises can sit. The next hour would turn as hours do. For now, the crown rested without weight, and the gloves fulfilled their duty: to hold steady what needed holding, and to remind the wearer that between skin and world there could be, sometimes, a tender distance chosen on purpose. Chapter 5. Waltzes and Whispers. The ballroom opened itself the way a story opens when the right listener arrives, eager to share, in no hurry to finish. Music lifted in comfortable arcs. Pastry towers leaned toward laughter. Conversation settled into that sweet cadence where questions and answers trade places like dance partners who know each other well. Anna stepped into the center of it, as if stepping into sunlight. She did not crackle. She glowed. She greeted a baker and remembered his son's name. She thanked a mason for the smoothness of a repaired stair that had saved 2 skinned knees in a week. She complimented a seamstress on a waistcoat and meant it. When someone invited her to a set, she took it, and her feet translated happiness into patterns the floor understood. The room allowed her brightness without ever asking her to be smaller. It is a wonderful kindness when a room can do that. Elsa kept to the room's gentler edge where the air felt cooler, and the view was entire. She was not hiding. She was curating. From there she could receive and release without tangle. A noble with a kind face told her about a village's new well as if he were speaking of a grandchild. A soldier praised the stable hands who had repaired a gate in the storm. And Elsa made a note to add a day of thanks for work that keeps trouble small. More than once she found herself smiling for no one in particular, the way candlelight sometimes smiles back when it realizes it is safe. When Anna spun back toward her after a lively reel, cheeks warm, hair slightly less perfect, Elsa offered her a glass of water as one offers a handkerchief in a snow flurry, practical and affectionate. "You are a sun with good manners," Elsa murmured. "You are a moon who chooses where to shine," Anna replied, bumping her shoulder lightly. They stood together long enough that their breathing found the same pace. A dance ended. Applause rustled like new leaves. Then the room, as rooms do, drew them apart with a kindness that trusted they would find each other again without drama. A young man with polite blue eyes and a smile like a practiced chord asked Anna for the next waltz. She said yes, because saying yes is a way of meeting the moment. He was charming in the way a mirror is charming, reflective, bright, handing back what you show it. His compliments were arranged like sugar flowers, delicate, shaped, almost convincing. Anna did not taste the hollowness yet, because kindness tastes like kindness, even when it has been piped from a bag. They moved in circles that felt like promises written in chalk on a sunny day, bright and plausible until weather arrived. Elsa watched for 3 measures and then looked away, out of courtesy to the dance. She drifted along the palm-shadowed wall and accepted a conversation about fisheries, another about library hours, a third about the most resilient potatoes. She filed each with interest. Her mind was clear and present. Her hands were calmer than she had dared to hope. The gloves were not fetters. Tonight, they were simply part of the uniform of her care. A breeze wandered through at the level of people's ankles, perhaps from a door left ajar to ease the warmth. It collected little stories as it went, a giggle, the cinnamon of a pastry, a whisper about someone's hat. When it reached Elsa, it lifted the edge of her skirt, and then let it fall politely. She thanked the air in her head. Gratitude is another excellent tool. The waltz turned and turned. The young man's words turned with it. Fate, he said, as if the word were a flower he had grown himself. Perfect, he said, as if he could see the future and liked what it contained. Anna heard the words with the ears of a person who has been lonely and was trying not to be. They rang and glittered. They promised a smooth road. She felt the lilt of being seen and wanted the seeing to be real. Wanting is not a fault. It is a direction. Between figures, Anna caught Elsa's profile. The line of it steadied her more than any sugar phrase. Later, she promised herself. I will tell her everything later, and we will laugh, and she will tease me. And I will say, I know, but just look at this glow. The promise made her lighter. She floated another circuit with blue eyes and a practiced chord. A footman approached Elsa with a question about the seating in a small anteroom, where two cousins had accidentally claimed the same chair with their pride. Elsa moved with him, soothing the problem by inventing a third chair out of a bench and a cushion, and the sentence, "You will do me a kindness if you take this place. It gives me a better view of the band," which delighted both cousins into generosity. She returned to the edge, knowing that most storms can be convinced to be tea if asked at the right moment, with the right spoon. Now the talk near Anna turned from sugar to plans. "Tonight is so right," the young man said, voice dipped in candlelight. "Why wait for other nights?" He spoke fast, as if outrunning doubt. "We could make a promise and make it hold." Anna's hands felt suddenly visible to the whole room. Her heart made a sound she had heard in old songs. A story sprang up at her feet like a road that appears with each step. It is possible to be brave and to be swept at the same time. She nodded once. She said a word that had lived inside 100 daydreams and now wanted to live in the air. The yes did not crack the floor. It did not change the weather. It was as quiet as the moment when a candle decides to take the flame offered to it. But quiet things can change the shapes of rooms. Anna's next thought was of her sister, bright and immediate. She crossed the floor with a softness she hoped would translate as not startling, not demanding, simply delighted. The music loomed its way into a new set. The chandelier hummed. The word yes floated above Anna like a moth that kept trying to land. "Elsa," she said, and in that one name there was glee, and a bit of the child she had been, and an echo of the woman learning not to leap without looking. She reached for Elsa's hands at the very moment. A messenger brushed past to deliver a card and a draft, stitched a seam of cool across the space between them. Elsa took a small step back because stepping back had been the safest way to keep the world safe for years. The step was measured and kind, and it met the draft at the same time Anna's fingers reached for her. The glove shifted. It did not fall. It sighed. The seam made a sound like a note trying to decide if it belongs to a chord. Anna, quick with emotion and quicker with hope, reached again. In some other hour, in some other room, both sisters might have laughed, might have made a game of almost catching a glove before it slid to the floor. But the hour was this hour, and the room was full of eyes. Elsa's breath, which had been so well taught all day, skipped. "I have to," Elsa said, and the sentence could have ended with any number of gentle necessities. "Check a list. Greet a guest. Find a quiet." The end of it did not arrive. Instead, the air arrived a little louder, and the brave stillness in her hands felt the old visitor wake. Fear is not always a shout. Sometimes it is the sudden narrowing of a corridor you have been walking comfortably. Elsa felt that corridor narrow. She felt, too, the memory that she had survived narrowing before. Her hand lifted half an inch. The glove loosened a whisper. The smallest frost filament, thinner than a hair, traced itself along the polished rail of the dais and vanished before most eyes would have chosen to see it. But one or two did. A small, puzzled hush stepped up to the edge of the music and asked to be let in. The violin answered by playing warmer. The conductor widened his eyes at the flutes and the flutes. clever, made their notes into gentle steam. Anna, whose first language was love, tried to speak it now. "It's all right," she said, which may be the truest sentence one person can offer another. Elsa heard it. She believed it as far as belief could stretch. She also heard from the older rooms in her mind the instruction that had kept everyone unhurt. Keep space, keep still, keep closed. Two truths knocked softly against each other in her chest. "Not here," Elsa said, because the room was a bowl catching every drop of sound. She meant not here for this conversation. She meant, we will speak when our words will not splash onto everyone's shoes. Anna, who hated waiting when joy tugged at her sleeve, heard a refusal she had not meant to invite. Her face stung. "For once," she began, and the sentence was about doors and years and lonely breakfasts that had tasted like stubbornness. She stopped it before it grew teeth. This was not a night for teeth. The draft, which had been merely a messenger, found itself drafted into meaning. It ran the edge of Elsa's sleeve as if reading a line. Someone opened a window wider for the warmth of the dancers, and the air applauded and came in. It brushed the candles. Flames bowed and resumed their posts. The gloves stood between skin and world the way a shoreline stands between sea and houses. The shoreline held until a wave, small but well-timed, tapped it just as Anna's word yes circled back and tried to land again. A ribbon of cold, as fine as a breath and as sharp as a bell, lifted from Elsa's palm and stitched itself into the air. It did not crack or shout. It sketched. It drew a fern of white across the nearest pane of glass, a pattern so delicate that even surprise softened into awe before worry remembered its training. A child pointed and whispered, "Look." Several people did. The conductor did not lower his baton. He asked the cellos for kindness and received it. Elsa took one step back, not far, just enough to widen the corridor inside her chest. She closed her eyes and found the count. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. She found the names: fern, window, bow, sleeve, smile. She found, too, the memory of how perfectly she had carried silver in the morning. The memory steadied the floor under her feet. Anna stepped with her, not crowding, not chasing. "Breathe with me," she said, "because when you cannot fix a thing, you can sometimes share the air around it." And they did for 3 beats that reset something small but important. The frost fern on the glass stopped where it was and did not spread. Around them, the ballroom decided, collectively and quietly, to be a kindness machine. People turned their faces toward conversation that did not require looking. Someone began a story at exactly the right volume. No, a server set a tray down near a group who needed distraction and produced, with practiced drama, a tower of sugared fruit that begged to be admired. Kindness is choreography, too. Still, the moment had been a hinge. Hinges invite doors to move. Elsa felt the room's question. "Are we still safe?" She answered with her posture. She answered with a smile that reached her eyes, small but luminous. She answered by remaining. The room heard the answer and accepted it. Acceptance is a wonderful musician. It tunes everything nearby. "Later," Anna said softly, and her later meant a quiet bench. Shoes off, laughing at how hearts can trip over good intentions. Elsa nodded. "Later," she echoed. And her later meant, "I will tell you what it is like to feel weather under the skin and how I am learning to be its friend." Music shifted to a slower measure. People who had been startled without intending to be found their way back to their feet, and then to each other's rhythms. The draft, job done, turned back into ordinary air and went wherever ordinary air goes. The frost fern held on the glass like a drawing a window had made for itself and seemed content to stay exactly the size it was. Anna's polite, blue-eyed partner returned, apologies fluttering, and Anna, whose kindness does not know how to be cruel to small things, nodded and took the offered place for a final, shorter turn. She kept the space between them exactly right. She stored her yes in a pocket where it would not fly out again without permission. He, sensing a boundary he did not entirely understand, smiled a little too much and promised a conversation later that both of them knew was not the conversation it had been an hour earlier. Elsa moved along the perimeter and let 3 people thank her for nothing in particular. She accepted each as a gift to be folded and put away for winter. At the fern in the corner, she did stand for a moment, and she admired the wall, which deserved the attention more than anyone gives walls. She let the cool kiss the back of her neck and felt it behave. She told herself with the plain words of a reliable friend that she had not ruined anything by being exactly who she was and exactly where she was. The hour settled. The musicians closed a piece with a sigh that belonged to wood and string. The steward's 2 fingers rose again, and the ballroom relaxed into the talk and sweetness that end good evenings. Plates arrived with warm, forgiving foods, cups filled with small comforts, the chandeliers dimmed by a breath, becoming companions for stories instead of partners for steps. A child approached the window with the frost fern and pressed a fingertip to the glass. The fern did not melt. It tolerated the curiosity and held its pattern. "It's pretty," the child said firmly, as if arguing a case. "It is," said the child's grandmother. "Some things are pretty because they are rare. Some are pretty because they are ordinary, and some are pretty because they are brave." The child considered this and nodded, as children are willing to do with truths that sound like puzzles. Anna found Elsa once more as the evening turned toward its gentlest edge. They did not stand very close, and they did not stand far. They stood in the distance a door requires to swing open safely. "I'm sorry," Anna said, "for pressing the moment." "I'm sorry," Elsa said, "for stepping back." The apologies did not cancel each other. They braided, becoming a stronger cord for later. "Tomorrow, will you walk with me in the garden?" Anna asked, "early before anyone is brave enough to be awake." "Yes," Elsa said, and this yes landed where yeses should, on the ground with roots. "Good," Anna said. "We'll find a bench that belongs to us. We'll pretend it always did." "I like pretending when the pretending is kind," Elsa said. "Me too," Anna said, and they smiled in twin small ways that told the same truth. Love does not always look like running across a room. Sometimes it looks like standing in the doorway and letting light choose how to enter. The night thinned toward whatever would come next. The windows held their drawings. The doors remembered their openings. The crown balanced. The gloves remained. In the quiet, between songs, a promise unclenched its fist and revealed itself to be simply a hand, open and empty, ready to hold what the next hour placed in it, whatever that might be. The night held steady. Chapter 6. The glove falls. It is a small thing when it begins, only a word that reaches for another word and finds the air between them thinner than expected. The ballroom is still sweet with music and pastry, still warm with people practicing their best selves, but at the dais, a conversation tries to stand and discovers its legs are soft. Anna's yes flutters near her shoulder like a moth who hasn't chosen a lamp. Elsa's careful breath sits, patient, on the chair she offered it earlier in the day. Between them, the draft from the wide doors wanders like a guest who hasn't remembered to knock. "Just listen," Anna says. Not because Elsa hasn't been, but because happiness has a quick step and sometimes trips on its own feet. "He asked, and I said the word wants to leap again." Elsa raises a palm as one might to a bright horse, kind, steady, asking for a little space so no one is startled. "Later," she says, "and the word is not a lock, it is a bookmark. We will return to this page. We will even laugh at how we folded the corner. But the room is a bowl that catches sound, and the bowl has a small crack no one knew to mend. The draft slips its thread through the crack and tugs at it, as if testing the seam. Elsa feels the tug not on her sleeve, not on her skin, but in the corridor of her chest where breath goes to learn manners. For a long time, the rule in that corridor has been, keep distance, keep calm, keep closed. It is a rule that has saved more than anyone can count. It is also a rule that has left some rooms empty. "Please," Anna says. And the please is full of 10 winters and 10 summers in the way a childhood voice can echo inside of a grown body. Only say it is possible." Her hands, which have always talked when her mouth did, reach for Elsa's hands at the same time. The messenger sets a folded card upon a tray nearby, and the heir rises politely to thank the server for the work. The glove meets fingers, the seam at that exact heartbeat size. It is not dramatic. It is a small looseness, a soft exhale where a stitch has done more than its share. The glove asks for gentleness. Elsa means to answer. But the corridor inside her has narrowed like a path where snow has drifted, and the air has found a bend it likes. Cold lifts its head, not roaring, only curious, like a deer stepping out of the trees. A ribbon of frost wakes along the rail of the dais, fine as a hair, bright as a thread of glass. It sketches a fern on the nearest pane. It stops. For 3 heartbeats, it simply exists the way a word exists on a page. Clear, legible, neither danger nor comfort. Only a truth written where everyone can see it. Nearby, a child whispers, "Pretty." The conductor lifts his chin and asks the woodwinds to make kindness, and they do. Anna feels 2 truths touch. Joy that wants to be shared now, and love that wants to wait when waiting is safer. "It is possible," she says, choosing the sentence Elsa asked for. "Not this minute, but possible." She steps back a little so the doorway of space between them can swing. Elsa's chest opens a finger width. Breath remembers. She lowers her hand, not from shame, but because she is choosing small good things over large, difficult ones. The glove hangs like a white petal caught on a twig. The frost fern holds its size politely. The room tests its calm and finds it still there. It could end this way, with weather tamed by patience and the night returning to its measured warmth. It does not end this way because the hour has been a hinge, and hinges invite a swing. 2 guests, late from the harbor, enter with the last of the outside in their coats. The sharper salt, the mountain's thin edge. The door opens wide. The draft that has been delicate finds a corridor from threshold to dais and chooses the straightest path. It is nobody's fault. It is a line of air doing what lines do. The seam that sighed gives a second sigh. The glove slips to Elsa's wrist. Skin meets air, and the air, already full of the mountain's idea, becomes a mirror. Ice is not anger. It is shape. From Elsa's palm, a small, bright geometry rises, no larger than a handkerchief, and fans outward across the polished floor in threads that look like stars practicing handwriting. Gasps happen the way rain does, many small drops at once. The musicians play warmer. The steward signals for more light and more stories in corners. Even surprise can be shepherded if given a busy path. Elsa does not run, not yet. She does what she has practiced. Names, breath, stillness, window, she tells herself. Fern, bow, sleeve, smile. The names steady the floor for 5 seconds. But the corridor inside her narrows again, not because she is weak, but because the body remembers before the mind can argue. She feels a winter that has always lived in high places lean down to greet its reflection. She feels the room watching, not cruel, only wide, and the wideness makes her hands cold. A crack of lace races toward the base of the musician's dais. It is lovely, and that loveliness frightens someone who has not learned yet that beautiful and safe can share a table. A chair leg, surprised by frost, skates an inch and claps hard against the floor to stop itself. The clap is louder than the music. Words brighten at the edges of mouths. A few lift their heads to fly. "Your Majesty," the steward says very softly. "Shall I?" He gestures toward a side door where air is quiet and walls do not listen as hungrily. Elsa hears the offer like a life ring tossed into a river. She also hears Anna's small inhale, the sound a person makes when a bridge she was about to cross draws back a plank. "When?" Anna asks. And the when is not about dances or signatures, but about the day they will be able to hold a conversation without a room in the way. "Soon," Elsa says, meaning it, and knowing that soon is a word made of elastic and prayer. Then the draft finishes the path it has chosen. It finds the space between glove and sleeve, tastes the skin there, and spins a single, perfect flake into the air as if to say, "I was always coming." The flake is nothing, so small it could be mistaken for lint, but it is also a door. 3 more flakes arrive, then 5. A spill of glitter touches the hem of a dress and melts, which should reassure everyone. Reassurance arrives a second too late. Someone bumps a tray. A glass overturns. The flute's note wobbles like a bird practicing a landing. The wobble is not a failure. It is physics. Still, hearts hear it and declare emergency. Elsa feels the room inhale, and with it, the corridor inside her shrinks to a thread. There is no malice in her. There never was. There is only a love that has been told. That love looks like silence and distance, and a door that learns to close quickly. She lifts both hands to protect the people she has always wanted most to protect. Protection, however, has many shapes, and this rising white lace spiraling from floor to ceiling, this chandelier briefly wearing a crown of frost, this breath turning visible, asks for distance she cannot make with only a word. The floor sketches flowers under everyone's feet. The windows learn delicate alphabets. Along the wall, a silver bowl grows a thin rim of ice that catches candlelight and becomes a ring. No shard flies. It is not chaos, it is abundance. Too much beauty arriving at once. And sometimes abundance asks us to move. Elsa takes one step backward and then another, the way a person steps away from a painting, when she realizes she is standing too close to see it kindly. Anna follows one pace, then stops when Elsa's eyes ask her to. She does not chase. "I will find you," Anna says, already shrugging into the coat of the sentence. "I know," Elsa says, already opening a door. The steward makes a lane with his body and two subtle hand motions. People who have learned to read rooms step aside with the grace of dancers changing formation. Music continues because music is a bridge. Elsa moves through the space made for her, and the frost under her shoes tinkles like a laughter trapped in glass. She does not look down. She looks at the side door and at the idea of night air where rooms have no eyes and the world is big enough to put a feeling down without breaking it. At the threshold, she pauses long enough to bow her head. It is not an apology. It is a farewell to the hour that tried its best. Then she slips out. The door closes with courtesy. The draft, satisfied, finds other work. For a breath, the ballroom is full of the hush that follows a spectacle. The mind counting, the heart arguing, the body remembering to breathe. Anna plants her feet. She is not a storm. She is a harbor deciding which ships to shelter and which to send. She looks at the window where the frost has written the forest. She looks at the faces around her, startled, kind, curious. "It's all right," she says. And though the two words cannot melt anything, they warm. She adds to the steward, to the musicians, to the person with the overturned glass, "Please eat, talk, be gentle." In the corridor outside, the air is cooler, the torches steadier. The castle, which loves both sisters in its stone way, sends its quiet through the walls. Do not hurry. Choose your steps. Anna chooses boots and a cloak, and the quick conference with the steward that will turn surprise into soup, awe into blankets, worry into work. Inside the ballroom, the music modulates toward comfort. Outside, Anna draws the cloak around her shoulders and heads toward the night that has just learned her sister's true name. Chapter 7, The Fjord Freezes. Night is a generous teacher, but it is also a mirror. It shows a kingdom what it looks like when the lights are soft and the breath of the sea is the loudest thing. When Elsa steps into the courtyard, the stars seem lower than they were, as if curiosity has tugged them closer. The air tastes new, not harsh. Water remembered as lace. She moves without looking back, not because she is ungrateful, but because some songs can only be finished away from the choir. Down the steps, across the arcade, through the arch where carriages pass. Her feet know the way a river knows downhill. A guard sees her and does not stop her. He recognizes a person leaving, so she will not break the room that kept her safe this long. He turns and quietly begins the work of care. Blankets in the vestibule, hot kettles for hands that will need holding, orders that sound like kindness, disguised as instruction. Elsa crosses the last courtyard. Beyond the gate, the town waits with its 1,000 small heartbeats. Before she reaches it, the harbor finds her. The fjord does not ask for permission to be itself. It never has. Tonight, it gives itself a new surface, thin, then thicker, the way a thought repeats until it becomes a belief. The water's skin cools and tightens. Ripples slow and turn to glass. The masts make a faint, surprise singing as frost climbs their ropes, line by line. The first true sheet of ice takes the moon and holds it. Little snow petals stipple it with pale freckles. Along the quay, seaweed that waved a minute ago becomes an etching. Fish pause, then slip deeper. A lantern at the end of the pier grows a skirt of clear beads and sways like a chandelier practicing humility. People come to their doors together without planning. At first there is only awe. Hands lift, palms open. The old ones tell stories about winters that tried to teach the town to bow, and the ways the town bowed and then stood again. Children stick out tongues to catch the first flakes, because tradition has rules even when the flakes are a surprise. The bell tower feels the cold first and hums it through stone. When it rings the hour, the sound is thicker, silver struck with a mitten on. No one minds. A bell should dress for the weather like the rest of us. Sound gathers in the streets and slides along the new ice to lie down with the moon. Lanterns lessen themselves to be suns, and windows take on the work of warming. Inside, kettles learn to boil faster. Bread warms its own slice of air. People knock on neighbors' doors with the plain question, "Do you have what you need?" A man with a limp gives the blanket he finished last week to a child whose mother is chasing drafts around the kitchen floor with a towel. The child accepts it, as royalty accepts a formal gift, solemnly, with a bow that is mostly a bounce. At the docks, a crew tests the ice with respectful suspicion. A pole does not go through. Farther out, another pole reports strength. Someone jokes that the fjord is practicing to be a ballroom floor. Someone else says the stars have moved below as well as above. A group of teenagers slide cautious feet on a shallow strip near shore, laughing. Two elders supervise from a crate and teach them the names of sensible falls. The castle's outer steps wear frost like embroidery. Statues acquire thin shawls. The rosebush sketches a white version of itself. In the alley behind the bakery, steam draws ghosts in the air that look pleased to be invited. The dogs, who have opinions about all weather, choose to be delighted. Their breath puffs like serious speeches cut into small jokes. Inside the ballroom, the last of the worry shakes itself into stories. The grandmother tells the child the fern on the window looks like the handwriting of winter. The child asks if winter can write letters. "Of course," the grandmother says. "Icicles are punctuation." A laugh moves along the wall and back again. People eat. Eating is a promise we make to stay. Anna collects what she needs with the efficiency of a person who has seen mornings turn into evenings while she was thinking of someone else. Boots, cloak, mittens lined with the kind of fur that remembers kindness, a lantern with a new wick. The steward brings a satchel of bread and cheese, a flask that does not leak, a coil of rope, a packet of herbs. "The north path will be firm," he says. "Watch the low places where the wind has stored extra snow." "Thank you," she says, and squeezes his elbow the way you squeeze a sentence to fit in fewer words. "Keep the big hearth going. Open the east gallery. The sun will find it in the morning." She turns to guards. "Check on the fish's cottage by the weir. The latchsticks. Take stew." She looks at the kitchen door. "Save the ends of bread for the birds." A dozen small orders become a net stretched under the night. People set about tying its knots. On the north edge of town, a reindeer snorts at the new smell and turns his head toward the mountain, as if answering a question. Christoph, who can translate reindeer, pats the broad neck. "I know. We're going up there." He tests the ice with his glove, then nods as one nods to a ready forge. He counts supplies in his head without numbers. When Anna appears with her lantern, Sven's ears tilt forward the way they do for friends. "You're going after her," Christoph says, which is not a question. "Yes," Anna says, which is not a surprise. "Then we should do it before the tracks fill," he says, "and we should take the path that listens." "Which one is that?" "The one that doesn't tell the mountain what to be." She smiles. She understands more than geography. "Can you come?" "Of course," he says, in the voice of a person who has learned that saying yes is often the most practical tool he owns. They choose a sled that has had more repairs than cracks. Christoph tightens a strap. Anna ties down the satchel. Sven shakes his antlers as if to make room for more determination. The lantern makes a warm egg of light around them. At the last moment, Anna looks back at the castle. In the high window, a shape that might be the steward or the knight lifts a hand until she lifts hers too. Then they move. The road out of town is familiar even in new clothes. Fences become white lines under a ruler. The little bridge puts on a pearl. The stream whispers under a thin lid, a secret kept because it is kinder. In the fields, rows of stubble stick up like tiny chairs waiting for spring's meeting. A candle burns late in a farmhouse window. A woman steps out to toss grain where hens usually peck. The hens come anyway, late and proud of it. High above, the North Mountain is awake. It is not menacing. It is a person who has heard her name and is turning to see who called. Snow moves along its shoulders in a slow sweep, like a shawl being adjusted. The wind up there has shapes. You can see them if you learn how not to blink too quickly. As they climb, the town's sound drops away. New sounds take its place. The squeak of new snow, the brush of a pine bough against another, the small, encouraging grunt a reindeer makes when a hill is honest about being steep. Anna lets these stitch a calm quilt across her shoulders. Her lantern makes a little window in the dark. Through it, the world looks composed. Beyond it, the world looks large and kind. Back behind them, Arendelle chooses its winter posture and chooses well. The big hall opens to anyone who wants to sleep near the hearth. The East Gallery gathers cots and quilts. Teenagers find a perfect job telling stories about the frost ferns and lending them to anyone who needs a dream. A miller's wife shows how to wrap feet in dry cloth before socks. The bell, pleased with its mittened note, agrees to ring gently at dawn if anyone asks. The fjord grows a thicker skin and sighs. The boats sleep. A fox tests the edge and decides that tonight she will try a path where water used to be. She takes 6 perfect steps and sits down, pleased with herself. Stars admire themselves in the harbor's mirror more than is modest. The night forgives them. Elsa climbs as if the slope knows her name. The snow does what she asks without argument, which feels less like power and more like finally speaking a dialect she had been ashamed to admit she knew. When she slows, the wind slows. When she steadies, the ice becomes a step. She does not carve. She coaxes. The mountain, please, offers a path that did not exist for anyone else 5 minutes ago. She stops at a ledge and looks back only to orient. The town is a handful of glow in a new bowl. The fjord is a calm pupil staring up at the sky's pale iris. A thread of lanterns marks the road north where 3 shapes, one human, one antlered, one sled, make their first inch of distance. Elsa's heart aches, but the ache is warm. It is the ache of knowing a tether still exists even when you loosen it, so no one's neck hurts. She turns toward the shoulder of the mountain and lifts her hands. A step grows, then a sweep of stairs guessing their destination. The sound they make as they rise is not a crack. It is a bell-bright note that keeps its promise to be beautiful and stops before it is loud. Above, a curve suggests itself into a balcony. A wall considers and then chooses generous geometry. Down below, Anna feels, without knowing how, the moment when that safety finds its roofline. The lantern trembles, a tiny quiver that might be wind and might be sister. "We're coming," she says, and the mountain accepts this as a fact. Kristoff points to a slant of rock. "There," he says, "the path that listens." They angle the runners. Sven leans like a dancer. Snow with the right idea bears them. Snow with the wrong idea slides politely away. Where drifts have stored themselves too deep, Kristoff steps down and breaks the crust in even chunks, humming as he does so. Anna finds her legs are stronger than her worry. Worry was heavy. Purpose is lighter. By the time midnight puts its thumb on the world and hushes it 1 degree more, Arendelle is a picture the painters will never quite get right, and that is fine. Some pictures are meant to be lived. People in the hall talk in drowsy runs and starts. A guard dozes and wakes with a mutter. The bell decides against ringing and thinks about morning instead. The fjord is quiet. The mountain is awake. And somewhere on the snow-stitched road, a lantern moves north like a small, steadfast star. A reindeer's breath writes poetry no one will read and everyone will feel. And a young woman holds her yes in one pocket and her love in both hands and goes on. Chapter 8. Into the White. Departure is a string of tiny decisions made with mittened fingers. Anna discovers that leaving well is an art, not a rush, not a stall, just the steady gathering of what the next step will need. The gates, so recently open for celebration, open again for purpose. Their iron scrollwork looks softer under frost, as if it, too, has remembered how to bend without breaking. A guard lifts the bar with a grunt that sounds like a blessing. The snow outside the walls has the texture of quiet. It is not cruel. It muffles wrong sizes of sound and lets the right ones pass. The creak of leather, the jingle of a modest harness, the way a reindeer's hoof chooses exactly where to land. Lantern light makes a traveling room, and inside that room faces are warm. Breath is visible. Conversation is honest because there is not enough space for anything else. Tell me about the mountain, Anna says, because she likes to fill silence with company, and stories are good company for hills. Christoph obliges in the tone of someone who loves a place without needing it to love him back. He tells her where the wind hoards itself and then spends itself in a rush, where pines grow with their backs to cliffs because they like to be surprised by sun, where a certain rock looks like a troll who lost track of time and politely turned into geology rather than be late for dinner. The road up threads itself between shoulder-high drifts that have learned to sit politely. Sometimes the drifts forget, and the sled's runner catches and lists. Christoph hops down, shoulders steady as a doorway, and Anna leans her weight in the right direction, because help comes in many sizes. She is surprised by how quickly her body learns the mountain's grammar. Push here, step there, wait, try again. Praise small victories, even when no one is watching. The mountain and she speak kindly to each other in the new language of winter. They pass a line of pines wearing night silk. Each tree has caught a bit of star and holds it like a kept secret. Somewhere to the right, water speaks in its winter voice, muffled, content, changing shape without complaining. On a rise, a fox watches and decides that these three are not interesting enough to follow. From a ridge, an owl declares the news, white, white, all is white, and then folds itself back into the color of the air. Anna's thoughts walk a pace ahead of her feet and then circle back, as thoughts will. She checks the pocket where she stored her yes. It is still there, still warm, still perhaps a little raw from being told to wait. She checks the other pocket where she keeps an older promise, love that endures doors and winters, and the rules fear writes in official ink. That promise, worn and sturdy, anchors her better than any strap. She doesn't need saving, Anna says, not to argue with anyone, but to remind herself. She needs a difference. Good different, Christoph says. He points to a hollow where snow has feathered. Step there, Light. She does. The step holds. Ahead, Sven tosses his head and chooses joy again because reindeer have a talent for it. His breath makes rings that break and disappear, small halos that do not brag. They stop under a rock overhang to drink and adjust straps. The world outside the little half-cave is a page still being written, the handwriting small and neat. Christoph pours a splash of something warming into the tea and pretends he did not. Anna blows across the surface and watches her breath mix with the steam and make a new weather. I always thought winter was empty, she says, surprised to hear the thought. I was wrong. Winter is a crowded house, Christoph says. You just have to learn where everyone keeps their coats. Back in the town, the crowded house of winter behaves. The east gallery's windows grow lace and let in a slice of pearl. Children pad in, stocking feet from cot to cot, checking on each other like cats. The kitchen sends out bowls of lentils and the kind of sausage that makes a person believe in the afterlife. The seamstresses organize mittens by size and invite anyone to take a pair and leave a story. One man writes that he has never liked winter but is willing to be taught by this one if it keeps being gentle. On the mountain, the snow's grammar grows more complex. Here, a cornice has decided aesthetics, not physics, will be its master. They give it a respectful birth. There, a drift has curled itself like a sleeping dog, harmless if you step around its paws. The stars crowd closer. Now the town light no longer competes so brightly. The moon lays its soft hand on the ridge and leaves a print that looks like a path only because Anna wants it to. Wanting is not always reliable, but tonight it is good company. They meet a traveler coming down, an old woman with a bundle of switches for brooms and a back that has negotiated terms with the slope and won. She squints and then softens when she sees Sven. He chooses good people, she says, as if Sven were the judge and she is merely the clerk. The mountain is in a mood, Kristoff offers. So is the queen, Anna says, because honesty is faster than small talk up here. The old woman nods once. Tell the mountain thank you in its own language. What's that? Quiet and careful feet. The path narrows to a trail that insists on single file and attention. Sven places each hoof as if the mountain can read, and he does not want to smudge the letters. The lantern circle draws closer as if shy of the drop, so they move by starlight for a while. Starlight is good at minding its own business. It does not encourage heroics. It approves of careful feet. Anna thinks about the door, how long it was closed, how often love can look like a barrier from the inside and like a boundary from the outside. She decides she loves doors most when they are clear about why they exist. I will not make my love into a lock, she says into her scarf. The scarf blushes at being entrusted with a vow and warms her neck for good measure. A ridge opens, and the world beyond expands with a hush that does not mean emptiness. It means attention. Below, on a shoulder of the mountain, light wakes where no village sits. It is not a hearth light. It is something crystalline, too bright and too pale to be lamp or torch, as if the moon has found a place to land and is practicing being a house. The air near that light sings a thin note that rises and falls with the breath of the person who made it. Anna stops because her body knows awe requires stillness to fit. Kristoff stops because he knows when not to interrupt a moment that is not his. Sven stops because he has learned that stopping is often the best part of going. There, Anna says. And the word is not a discovery. It is a recognition. There, she repeats. And this time the word is a promise she makes to her feet. The mountain, who has heard countless vows, approves this one for its simplicity. They descend to a shelf where the wind has stitched a terrace. The path is honest, if tilted. Kristoff ties an extra loop of rope around a spur and hands the end to Anna. Hold this for me, he says. I'll test the drift. She holds. He tests. The drift holds too. It is a good hour when everyone agrees. Back in Arendelle, the great hall floats in a warm fog of breathing and soups. The paintings in the East Gallery, which usually insist on their own silence, seem to tilt an ear toward the children's stories. The steward walks the length of the room and back again, practicing the art of seeing without hovering. He stops to refill a kettle. He kneels to tie a lace. He lifts a sleeping boy and moves him 2 inches so a girl can fit her shoulder more comfortably. His list, which has thrown off its usual stiffness, follows like a happy dog. A girl wakes and asks if the queen is safe. Yes, the steward says, which is true in a way that those who love brave people must get used to. And the prince says, yes, he says again, with the kind of faith that does not ignore danger but negotiates with it. The girl accepts both yeses because, for tonight, accepting is the best job she can do. She goes back to sleep as if diving into water she has learned to float on. Up above, wind changes key without changing kindness. The crystal light on the shoulder of the mountain steadies, then glows. A shape like a staircase draws breath and becomes more staircase. A curve like a balcony tries its courage against the open air and succeeds. Between one heartbeat and the next, Anna feels the palace become not only possible, but inevitable, as if it had always been folded into the snow waiting for the right hands to unfold it. She does not resent the beauty. Love that resents beauty forgets its own face. Almost there, Kristoff says. We'll stop at the lee of that rock and go the rest on foot. Yes, Anna says, and feels the word land in the good pocket. She straightens her gloves and pulls her hood closer and thinks absurdly of the bench in the garden she promised to pretend belonged to them. She makes room in her mind for 2 benches, the one in spring under the pear tree, and the one made of light and frost she is about to stand upon. Love can have more than one address. They reach the lee. The wind behaves on this side. The noise of the palace, because it is a kind of music, threads in and out of hearing like a thought that returns each time you blink. They tie the sled. Kristoff checks Sven's strap one more time. Sven suffers the fussing with the dignity of someone who understands that worry is a cousin of love. Stay, Kristoff tells him. Sven stays, which is another of his talents. The last stretch is steep enough to make legs notice their job and short enough to make them proud to be hired. Snow squeaks cheerfully. Ice steps reveal themselves under softer layers, each one sturdy as a promise kept. Anna thinks, I am walking into something that scared her. She thinks, I will make a room where she does not have to be brave in the same way all the time. She thinks, we will learn when to be close and when to make space and how to call the space by its right name so it does not feel like loneliness. At the crest, the palace lifts itself into full view. It is not gaudy. It is not meek. It is the exact size of a breath drawn to its deepest and then released. Arches unfurl like the grammar of snowflakes. Windows blossom and hold their shapes. The stare that began as a suggestion is now a sentence. And the sentence says, come if you can be gentle. Anna can. She steps until the first riser meets her boot. The stair sings under her weight, not loudly, just enough to register delight at being used for what it was made to do. Kristoff, who knows when the world is doing something that will be better if it is not narrated, says nothing. He stands a pace behind, a witness rather than an interruption. The wind considers being clever and decides not to. The stars, who enjoy being audience, give their attention without advice. In the town below, a bell rings the hour it always would have rung. In the garden that waits for spring, a bench holds frost and pretends to be marble. In the mountain's new house, a sister lifts her hand to welcome herself home. Below them, the town turned its face toward morning, not afraid, curious, as families tucked quilts higher and promised each other stories to trade once the sisters found each other and winter learned the shape of kindness again. There is no door here, only an opening shaped by welcome and accuracy. Anna sets her palm against the cool edge and speaks the simplest of her truths into the white. It's me. The palace knows the name in that sentence. The night, pleased to be included, closes gently behind her and keeps the wind from eavesdropping. Inside, somewhere above, a breath steadies the way a lamp does after a draft has learned its manners. The story becomes a narrower, kinder corridor, and the rest of the night steps closer to what it has been waiting for. Chapter 9. A palace from a single breath. The opening is not a door so much as a decision. A clean-edged arch, glass clear and star thin, shaped by a hand that has finally let itself finish a gesture. Anna steps through, and the air changes very slightly. The way a room changes when someone you love has just walked in and not yet spoken. Under her boots, the floor is winter-made kind, firm, singing faintly, holding without asking her to tiptoe. All around, light has learned new grammar. It bends through hexagon windows, fractures once, twice, then arrives soft as lace on the far wall, held there the way a lullaby holds last notes. Hello? She says, but quiet, because this house seems to prefer the kind of voice that folds itself neatly when it's done. Her breath rises and blends with the palace's own weather. She can hear its song now, not a melody exactly, but a polite, bell-bright hum, like crystal remembering a stream. A staircase unfurls in front of her, step by step, the way a fern unrolls in spring. The rails grow alongside as if they, too, want to be useful. Their surfaces are smooth, the way truth is smooth when you finally stop fighting it. Higher up, a slender balcony curves like a smile. At its edge, a figure stands level with the beginning of stars. Elsa's cloak lifts an inch and falls, the smallest bough. Her hair is calm. Her posture is the kind that learned steadiness the hard way and kept it anyway. She turns, not startled. Seeing. Anna lifts a hand, palm open. She can feel her own heart rush to the front of her chest to look over the railing. Oh, hi, Anna says, because sometimes the old words are best. Elsa descends without needing the stairs to finish. They place themselves under her, stepping stones offered in real time. The mountain's courtesy brought indoors. When she reaches the floor, they stand with 2 arm lengths between them, the prime distance for doors that want to open safely. The palace listens the way good rooms do, interested and unafraid. I didn't want a castle that locked, Elsa says. Her voice is even. The quiet shapes around it approve. I want one that could breathe. It does, Anna answers. It's breathing right now. They look together. You can see it if you let your eyes soften. The walls brightening and dimming by a breath width. The ceiling's frost patterns rising like thought and settling like decision. The floor carrying weight as if weight were music and the score were generous. Nothing is sharp unless asked. Even the corners have learned how to be hospitable. How far did it reach, Elsa asks. It is not the first question Anna expected, and yet it is honest. So she answers it that way. The fjord is wearing a mirror, Anna says. The bell learned a mitten. The town remembered blankets and shared them before anyone could ask. She lets a smile find its way. The teenagers began running stories for the frightened before the frightened knew what shape their fear had. We've turned the East Gallery into a small summer. The steward says good soup is strategy. Elsa breathes. The palace expands a shade. Relief is a kind of weather, too. You can feel it as a lightness in the elbows. No harm, she asks. Only awe, Anna says. And the kind that ends as kindness, not as fear. She tips her head. I think it likes being beautiful for a while. Elsa looks past her to the stairs that grew under her feet without complaint. I have spent years making my world small to keep the people in it safe, she says. I do not regret it. I also do not fit in a small world anymore. She lifts a hand, and the railing beside them grows a leaf vein of frost, a single line, precise, no larger than a willow switch. It stops when she stops. That stopping makes both of them laugh, startled and quiet. Anna holds up her own hands, mittened, ridiculous, brave. I came without a plan, she confesses. On purpose. Plans are a kind of door sometimes. I wanted to be a window. Elsa closes the space between them by one small step, enough to enter a clearer light. Tell me something true that will still be true tomorrow, she says. I love you, Anna says. And because words deserve sturdy company, she adds, I will not make that love into a lock. Not here, not anywhere. Elsa's shoulders lower an inch. The palace catches the gesture and hangs a prism of light above them. Almost a blessing, and almost a lantern. Tell me something useful, she says, not to test, but to anchor. The town can keep itself warm, Anna says. We built for winter, even on summer days. The big hearth is fed. The East Gallery is calm. The steward has sent stew to the fisher's latch that sticks. No one will decide anything large until you choose what shape large should be. But people will be kind without waiting for orders. They're already doing that. Elsa nods. She looks at her hands, then at the glove that loosened there hours earlier, and would not behave. Then back to Anna. May I try something? She asks. The question is to herself as much as to her sister. She slips one glove off, then the other, not as rebellion, not as proof, only as a test in a room that will not punish honesty. She breathes. The air answers by turning lovely and then content, remaining exactly the size it should be. In her palm, a small shape forms. Not a storm, not a weapon. A candle made of clear frost, wick unlit. She sets it on a crystal ledge that wasn't there a moment ago and now cannot imagine not being there. For the East Gallery, she says quietly. Bring it home with you at dawn. It doesn't melt. It only learns the light of whatever room it's in. Anna touches it with a finger wrapped in wool. It is cooler than stone and kinder than glass. You made a way for light to live somewhere new, she says, surprised by how the sentence fits so many things at once. They sit beside each other on the lower stair as if that had been the plan all along. The stair hums to be chosen. Far below in the town, a kettle agrees to boil again. Far above, a star remembers the taste of ocean on winter air. I thought I had to choose, Elsa says, between safety and self, between quiet and the size I actually am. Maybe the choice is different, Anna says. Between being alone with a feeling and letting someone sit next to it. I can sit next to a lot. I'm built for that. She grins. I've been training on stubborn furniture all of my life. Elsa's laugh is soft and thoroughly present. You don't have to be smaller here, she says, and gestures around them. Neither do I. They build a little alphabet of signals because skill loves practice. If Elsa says fern, it means I need a shorter sentence. If Anna says bench, it means Let's move this conversation to comfort. If either says bell, it means breathe on purpose. They try them once, not because they need them in this minute, but because rehearsal lowers the heartbeat of future minutes. Bench, Anna says now, teasing, and the palace, delighted to be included, grows a small seat that looks like a curled ribbon and feels like a steady lap. They sit there together, two pairs of knees lined up as if they've remembered a childhood posture and forgiven the years that took it away. Below, Kristoff leans back against the lee stone and pulls his hat over his eyes, the way a man does when he trusts a mountain not to smudge his dreams. Sven makes a sound that is precisely a sigh and not remotely a complaint. They can both feel the night choosing its quieter key. Wind drops from a word to a breath. Snow stops, recommending itself, and simply is. What do you want for morning? Anna asks at last. Honesty, Elsa says. No rush. People warm and sleeping. The bell to ring its mitten note the way it wants to. The town to know I did not run from them, but toward the place where I could learn the shape of what I am without cracking the bowl. You can have all of that, Anna says. You already do. And you? Elsa asks. A path, Anna says. From here to there and back again. That doesn't tangle either of us. A job. I'm better when I have jobs. She counts on fingers. Carry your candle to the gallery. Tell them what I saw. Art, not accident. Remind them blankets belong to everybody. Schedule story hour with the teenagers. Learn how to skate on the strip by the quay without falling on my nose. Add, bring your nose back in one piece, Elsa says, amused. Add, bring back soup, Anna says. You can pretend the palace doesn't eat, but I'm feeding you anyway. Silence is easy for a while, and when silence is easy between two people who have lived long under the shadow of a door, it is a miracle worthy of quiet applause. They watch light braid itself through the high windows. The palace practices holding still when asked. A small breath of snow drifts from the ceiling and lands in Elsa's open palm. It does not melt. It simply sits there like a tame star. She tips it onto the rail, and it becomes a bead that will be found by no one and enjoyed by the room. Bell, Anna says gently when she hears Elsa's breath quicken at nothing more than the idea of many faces. They breathe together for 4 counts. The palace's hum steadies to match them. Fern, Elsa says, when Anna begins to plan aloud in paragraphs. She clips her sentences to simple, chewable pieces until both of them are smiling. Bench, they both say when nothing in particular is wrong and everything deserves comfort anyway. They stay until the blue of the night becomes a lighter blue, the kind dawn makes just before it admits it was always hiding a little day at the bottom of its pockets. And if either of them notices that time has passed without their guarding it, they do not say so. They will remember, instead, the feeling of sitting in a room built by fear that learned how to be a house for love. Will you watch the sunrise from here? Anna asks. Yes, Elsa says. Bring the town the first light, Anna says. I will, Elsa says. Then I'll bring you back breakfast and 100 small reports, Anna says. I live for small reports, Elsa says, and the kind of smile that belongs to sisters decides this is a good hour to live on 2 faces at once. They stand. Elsa sets her hand to the rail and the staircase wakes again, eager to be used but not insistent. They do not hug. They do not need to. There is a distance between them now that has acquired a new name. Space for staying whole. They walk to the opening shaped by welcome. At the threshold, Anna lifts the frost candle as carefully as a lantern made of sleep. The palace thanks her with a sparkle sharp as dew. It's me, Anna says again, testing the phrase both directions, going out, coming back. The mountain, which has heard all the important sentences and prefers the short ones, keeps the wind courteous for her passage. The night nods and opens its coat. Elsa returns to the balcony. Her hands are bare. The air is friend-shaped. Below, 3 figures, human, antlered, brave, gather their sled, their breath, their purpose, and start down toward a town that has already begun to practice a better morning. The palace hums, pleased with the work it did and the work it did not do. Snow settles. Starlight gives the floor back to thin dawn. For the first time in a long time, the night feels not like something to survive, but like something achieved. Chapter 10. First light on a frozen morning. Morning chooses pearl first, then silver, then the palest gold it owns. That is how it steps into Arendelle, polite, carefully dressed, aware of where it is going. The fjord accepts the light and learns a new glitter. If you look at the harbor from the bell tower before breakfast, it seems as if a second sky has been laid under the first, and the boats float between them like punctuation, deciding what kind of sentence this day should be. Inside the great hall, stovetops chatter. Lids click. A spoon rings the edge of a pot like a small bell lost and found. Children come awake the way bread rises, slow, warm, patient, with the hands that shaped them. The steward walks the rows of cots with a blanket he has convinces to be generous. He trades quiet with the watch captain, a report for a cup of tea, a smile for a promise that the east wind has learned better manners. In the gallery, the lace on the windows has not melted. It has refined itself into finer script, as if night finished a letter and left it for whoever opens the room first. Anna arrives with the frost candle wrapped like a secret. Two teenagers, up too early and proud of it, are laying out bowls and maps of who sleeps where. A library lamp, Anna says, letting the sentence be an invitation rather than a declaration. They understand without needing the rest. She sets the candle on the central table. It does not shed heat. It sheds a sort of clarity, the way a good idea does. People file past for bread, and thin slices of cheese and thicker slices of story. It was beautiful, says a woman who cried last night and did not apologize. I was afraid, says a man who did not cry and does not apologize either. I was not afraid, says a child, and I think I should have been, but I wasn't. The steward says, we can hold more than one feeling. That's what rooms are for. He doesn't mean the gallery only. At the quay, under watchful eyes, a stretch of ice has been claimed for careful play. Brooms mark its edges. A rope, bright as a ribbon, forbids adventure from trying to write the wrong kind of story. Boots become skates by the old trick of laces and imagination. Hands are held. Laughter goes out to meet breath and comes back warm. Two elders teach the word tuck, and three small bodies pretend their knees are better at obedience than knees have ever been. In the kitchens, a pot of oats thinks about the nation and decides to help. Cinnamon agrees. Someone insists on a spoon of jam for each bowl, because sweetness is strategy too. A boy heads for the door with more bowls than hands, and the cook reties his scarf and reduces his cargo to what won't be spilled when he remembers to wave at the bell tower on the way. People learn the way quickly when the lesson is kindness. The bell rings its mitten note for the first time in daylight, and sounds pleased to be a new instrument. Its voice does not carry far. It carries exactly where it is needed. At the edge of the square, a pair of cousins who argued last night over a chair find themselves arguing instead about who gets to take the first tray up to the miller's mother. They settle it by both going and learning how to step in time along the icy street like two dancers who have never danced but always hoped to. Under the palace, the world learns the color that belongs only to just before sunrise on a frozen morning. It is not blue, not properly. It is a clearer thing, like blue glittering with an idea. On the balcony, Elsa stands with her hands on the rail, bare, free, behaving. She watches it arrive and feels for the first time in longer than memory a day that is allowed to start without the old practice of bargaining. From here, the town is a scatter of small homes wearing good hats. Smoke rises obediently and does not pester anyone. The fjord glows with a layer of silk green under the silver, a trick the water learned from the sky. A small brown dot that might be a fox stands on the ice, turns once as if checking the scene, and sits down to be a witness. Elsa laughs. The sound turns to frost, then to glass, then to nothing, having enjoyed its own company. She speaks to the light not as a queen and not as a child, but as someone whose language has finally acquired enough words to talk to a morning. I will not make you smaller, she says quietly, and means both the day and herself. She will let the mountain keep its palace because houses built quickly can collapse the same way. This house was not built quickly. It was built in the long hour between fear and the decision to stop apologizing. But everything deserves a first day. She will not smother this one with fixing. Anna climbs the last turn of the North Road and sees the balcony catch fire with a thin, honest gold. She does not hurry. Hurrying at the top of a climb is the surest way to get scolded by your own lungs. Christoph lags a pace to give her the dignity of arrival. Sven chooses to snort in a particular key that means he would like to pretend to be hungry for a minute longer before breakfast appears, and also that he is ready to be admired. "You are right," Anna says to the morning first, "because it has done a great deal of labor and deserves credit." Then she says, "Elsa," to the figure at the rail, and the name crosses the distance like a bridge that knows it is trusted. "I can hear the bell from here," Elsa says when she is close enough that the sentence won't have to shout, even with its mitten. "They put it on themselves," Anna said. "We did very little except carry blankets and agree to be calm at the same time." Elsa nods, pleased. She gestures to the palace, which has taken the new light into its own body and is now unapologetically beautiful in a way that asks nothing from anyone. "Will it frighten them?" she asks. "They will be surprised," Anna says. "And then they will make metaphors. Someone will call it a library of ice. Someone will say the windows look like the inside of snow. A child will ask if the floor sings. 3 old women will insist it looks exactly like the year they were 19. The baker will begin experimenting with sugar." She grins. "It will be fine." I don't know what to do next," Elsa says. And the honesty is not a crack. It is a foundation. "We make a morning plan," Anna says. She counts on fingers again, not because Elsa needs lists, but because Anna does, and because lists can sometimes hold 2 people's weight at once. "You stay and learn the edges of this. I go down and be hands. We tell everyone that everything will be decided after breakfast, which is when decisions behave best. I bring up food and 5 small stories on the hour. You send me back down with 1 sentence each time I leave. We keep them simple. We make a pile of simple sentences big enough to build a bridge." Elsa smiles. "You were made to be a bridge," she says. "I was made to run across them and wave people over," Anna says. "Different job. Similar shoes. The first sunlight reaches them as they go on about work, and the palace reveals facets it had kept like secrets all night. A wall wakes a pattern that looks like feathers nested into scales, tender, armored both. A column grows hair-thin filaments, then tucks them away as if embarrassed by its own flourish. The stair where they sat changes its tune faintly, because wood and stone and ice have always known how to sing different songs for different hours. "What will you say?" Anna asks, testing the first of the hour's 1-sentence messages. Elsa considers and learns the shape of brevity in her mouth. "I am well," she says. "It is not coded. It is not pretending. It will be sufficient for the first trip." "And the second?" "I am learning," Elsa says, and the cold at the word's center is clean, not cruel. "Third," Anna prompts, "help each other," Elsa says, more certain. "Fourth?" "Eat warm things," Elsa says, surprising herself by how right it feels to give ordinary orders. "Fifth, I will come when it is time," Elsa says. The promise is not elastic or rushed. It is a measured thing that can bear being touched by many hands. "Good," Anna says. "Perfect." She chooses not to add another instruction. The day does not need garnish. She turns to the stairs. The steps collect under her boots like loyal dogs. "See you soon," she calls over her shoulder. "Bring back soup," Elsa calls, matching the tone. The descent is a new road in a new world. Wind has changed its job from sculptor to mail carrier and delivers scents instead of drifts. Pine, distant cinnamon, a memory of fire. Sven decides the sled is a chariot. Christoph decides to let him, because joy that doesn't jostle safety is the best kind. Anna's lantern swings at her side, lit out of habit. Halfway down, daylight makes itself master, and the small flame, proud of having done its night's duty, goes out by itself without drama. She doesn't relight it. You don't force the old light to compete with the new. At the town edge, 3 children see her first and wave with their whole arms as if signaling ships. "How is she?" one asks, because their job is to be direct. "Well," Anna says and watches the word hang in the air. "Catch sun. Become a small banner." She hands out small jobs like biscuits. "You take this to the steward. You tell the teenagers the library lamp is working. You go ask the baker what sugar does when it sees a palace. In the gallery, the frost candle has taught the light how to gather. People step softer without being told, the way they do in a cathedral and in a sick room when someone has finally fallen asleep. The steward listens to Anna's 5 sentences as if they were bread, and then breaks them into pieces for anyone whose hands are empty. "I am well," the miller's mother repeats, smiling, because sometimes it helps to borrow a queen's words, even if your own bones are doing the talking. "I am learning," says a boy who discovered this morning that he can skate by standing still. "Help each other," says a woman tying one mitten to another with string. "Eat warm things," says the cook. Pleased to be quoted. "She will come when it is time," says a teenager who keeps glancing at the door, not because she doubts, but because hope likes proof. The bell rings once. The sound sits in the air and does not hurry anyone. The skating strip hosts a parade of new ankles. 2 men who stopped speaking last summer because of offense discover that shared falls are good medicine. A dog refuses to skate but insists on supervising. The fox, bored with being a witness, finds a safer field to inspect. A loaf shouts its doneness from the oven, and a hand catches the shout and uses it to call people to eat. When Anna climbs back out, the sled is lighter and her pockets are empty of everything except purpose. The wind remembers its manners and the sun remembers what to do with a palace. The second message is easy. "I am learning," Elsa says when Anna reaches the balcony again. She is. The room holds still when she asks it to. The frost grows only where invited. She has made a cup of nothing that holds warm tea without dripping, because hospitality is a language she wants to speak in every weather. "Help each other," Elsa says for the 3rd trip, and Anna carries the sentence down the mountain like a flag that doesn't threaten anyone. She plants it in conversations and watches people salute by taking bowls to neighbors and laughter to people who have been quiet too long. When she returns, her cheeks have learned more red. "Eat warm things," Elsa says for the 4th, and the town answers with yeses loud enough to be heard by a bell. By the 5th trip, the palace has practiced its own kindnesses until they are muscle memory. The rails stay rails. The edges do not snag. A small room in the high corner has learned how to be as cozy as ice can be, which is surprisingly cozy when you let it be. Elsa stands on the balcony with a new steadiness that has nothing to do with holding still. "I will come when it is time," she says, and it feels like a sunrise folded into a sentence. Anna delivers that, and with it a promise of her own. "I will come up again whether the world needs me to or not, because sometimes people are the job." The steward approves. The bell approves. The teenager starting a ledger of borrowed skates and borrowed stories approves and writes the sentence across the top margin in neat, thin letters. Mid-morning spills itself around the corners. The fjord flashes its second sky at a gull who is tempted to take it too literally and then doesn't. The ice on the quay has been swept into straight paths. The brooms stand like soldiers who know their orders are to make life softer. The bakery makes something that did not used to exist. A sugar window that shatters lightly at first bite and tastes faintly of cold. People bite and grin like conspirators. Someone takes a piece to the bell and says, "For your mitten," and laughs when the joke works. Up the mountain, a quiet grows that is the good kind, the kind that follows effort and leaves enough room for the next thing. Elsa sits with her back to a pillar and lets the wind read. It hums a little, as wind does when it finally likes the room it's in. The palace's song is lower now, content perhaps, or practiced. She thinks about walking down at noon and decides noon is too bright for first steps. She thinks about evening and decides that shared light is better for first arrival than shared shadows. She decides to come at the hour when people begin to call the day successful, because soup was good and no one went to bed lonely. Hannah sits in the East Gallery with her boots under a bench and her hands around a cup, writing the names of small victories she does not want to forget. 3 bowls carried by one careful boy with no spills, a mitten returned to its partner, a woman who had not left her house in a season laughing at the window. The way the frost candle never flickered and still managed to suggest there would always be enough light if we were sensible about it. She adds for herself a line about a stair that sings and a bench made of ribbon, because you should keep a ledger of the wonder as well as the work. By afternoon, the sky dresses in a proper blue and the sun makes clean shapes on clean snow. The skating strip becomes a school for clumsy grace. A cat that refused last night's blanket steals a patch of sun and forgives the town for its concern. The steward eats standing up and pretends his knees don't notice. Then he sits because someone points at a chair the way one points at important speeches, and his knees